Hi, guys. Welcome back to my podcast. Welcome back to Sean's Magical Odyssey. And I'm very excited today, guys. I have a very special guest on today. His name is Frank Reynolds. He's going to be talking to us today about something that's kind of, I think, on a lot of people's minds right now, especially with the things that are going on in the world. We are talking today about anxiety and depression. And Frank has experienced both of these things previously. And I feel like he's not necessarily an expert, but he kind of knows what he's talking about. And I'm so excited that he is joining me today and that you guys get to listen to his story. So let's get started. So, Frank, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So Frank, tell the listeners a little bit about who you are, just so they get a little background of who this person is.
Yeah, so Frank Reynolds is the name. I'm Canadian, been here for a while. Kind of my story is kind of pretty simple as I see it, as I describe it. Played football for about 15 years. Well, yeah, about 12 to 15 years, somewhere in there. And then my football career was abruptly halted by injury.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it really just sent me on an adventure of self-discovery, rediscovery, uncovering. And it's led me to this point now where I'm busy working on building my own business and adventuring into my passions and whatever fills me up.
Right. And it's interesting because we did meet. We were both members at one of the local CrossFit gyms. And of course, we knew you, my group knew you as the football players, right? So
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, here comes the football players, right? Jumping on into the gym. And though I knew who you guys were, I didn't know you personally. And for me, I always remember the day that we've had kind of first had an interaction is the day you were against the back door at the CrossFit box and you were rolling out your lats with a lacrosse ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember I was doing some deadlifts or something. I looked up at you and all of a sudden the door swung open and you swung right out into the back alleyway.
Yeah.
And then I remember you came back in wondering if anybody had seen you. And of course, yes, I had seen you fall out the door. So I always remember that story. I can vividly remember that image still. And that's just, kind of how I feel like that's what it took. And then we conversed from there. And then I've just always been able to chat with you about stuff since that time. So that's how we met. So that's the thing, right? It's dealing with anxiety and depression. And I think that's a big thing with people right now, especially because there's the pandemic is going on. And I feel like in a lot of ways, even though people didn't know that they had it kind of bubbling under the surface, certainly the pandemic has brought some of that out, right? And a lot of your stuff that you were experiencing was long before a pandemic came. Of course, you had mentioned that you had a pretty good or prominent football aspirations, right? Everybody was so excited. And then unfortunately, what happens sometimes to a lot of players is they suffer an injury and that kind of puts the end to their football career. So do you feel like, have you always struggled with anxiety and depression, or is there a particular moment that kind of set that off for you?
Well, as I describe it simply, anxiety is fear and depression is reflection. And I've had many moments where it's affected me in my life looking back. Now, looking back, I might not have been as conscious as I am now to the present moment because I was so caught up in living for the next moment as I describe it. So I definitely experienced it to various degrees. I can definitely say before I became very vocal about my experiences and just talking about whatever came to the heart, I definitely experienced episodes of depression. I've had moments of anxiety, both paralyzing and both motivating to move forward and to step into the future. And so it's always been a part of my life. if I'm being honest, I believe that depression and anxiety are part of everybody's lives. And that's a portion of what this whole stigma on mental health is that there's people that are exceptions, when in reality, there's 8 billion plus people in the world. There's no way one illness or one diagnosis can blanket everything. So everybody's experiencing it to different degrees. But, if I'm in the water, that's not anxiety for one person, but it can create anxiety for somebody else. So it's the experience to the individual.
Exactly. And so what made you want to talk about it? Because first of all, okay, if you look at statistics, men often are very quiet, right? Men internalize, they don't talk about depression or anxiety. It's considered, not a masculine thing to do. You just keep it bubbled in and you continue on with life. And not only that, also being an athletic performer as well too, right? You don't talk about those things. You're the big guy on campus, you're walking around the field, you don't talk about your depression and anxiety. That's what women talk about. So like what did you wrestle with that in the beginning? Like you were uncomfortable to start talking about it? And if so, then what changed that?
Yeah, so I mean, in college, I never really talked about it because it wasn't something it wasn't on the front of my mind. I was playing football, life was good, and I didn't have to stop and think about those other aspects. To me, something that was fearful or scared me, I'd face it, and I never really had a moment to analyze. It was just kind of go for it. Um, when it started kind of becoming more real when I got into professional sports. And what I started realizing is that it was as if everything that I had done to lead up to being a professional athlete, a lot of the things that were physical that we could see, like my body and my physical shape, they were top notch. What I realized upon reflection and began to understand as I was getting into it, that actually my mental health was not up to par with where I was at because it wasn't developed and it wasn't worked on and it wasn't something that I had ever really thought about addressing. So what that looks like is when something happens or when adversity hits at a new level that I wasn't ready for, I didn't have the necessary tools to handle the adversity. And so for somebody else, when I say I went to another level and I was not communicated what was expected of me and I was left. For some other people, they might be prepared for that, but for me, that caused me anxiety and it created an episode of depression as I pulled away, figuring out what went wrong, trying to calculate and do all those things. An aspect of it is lone wolfing, as I describe it, so doing everything on my own, which is a part of being a man, which is, I feel, the old way. And so all of these factors created this whole event that happened in my life that led to me discovering that a part of my purpose in life is to be of service to the younger community. And now I'm realizing everybody, because nobody truly has those intimate conversations about anything on this topic. Or it's starting, it's opening up.
So did you feel, I feel like when we talked about this previously, when you were first kind of coming to terms with things, I think you were dealing more with being angry, right? You were kind of angry in the beginning.
It
Um,
it was like I was a combination of angry, disappointed. I was dealing with abandonment. There was a lot. It's the big cataclysmic moment for me that led me on my journey was after experiencing a pretty serious injury. I felt abandoned by a team that I essentially, like, I put my life on the line, and I went to go meet with the coaches before coming back because I just wasn't well. And I said, what do I get to do to be ready for next season? And all they said was take care of your mind, which is fair, and I appreciate it. Take care of your mind, but I felt like, and upon observation, I realized that it was kind of like let's just kind of blow this under the rug and let it go. And at that point, I was like, okay, I don't know what that was about, but what I do know is that what I get to do is get back to who I am and discover who I am at the root, because that speaks to me.
Yeah, and and that's unfortunate. So I'm trying to think, did you play another season after that, or that was it?
No, that was in 2018, and that was it.
That was the end.
I spent, that was the end of 2018, and I went into 2019 dealing with severe depression and
Mhm.
suicidal ideation, and all of that it was hard for me in the moment, and then now upon reflection, I recognize what that purpose was for me. It served a purpose, and that's one of the mechanics that I use to take on everything in my life is that if I can take a lesson out of it or purpose, and sooner the better. But if I can look at things that way, then it supports me in recognizing that my life is purposeful and that everything is leading me to whatever may be next.
Right. I always feel it's so sad when people just feel like they're at the end of the road or at the end of the line, and that suicide is something that they contemplate.
Hmm.
If you feel comfortable talking about it,
Hmm.
what kind of brought you to that point that you just felt like, this is it. I don't want to live anymore,
Hmm.
and it's time to end it. Like what brings someone to that point? I've never experienced myself. We all have little fleeting moments sometimes when we hurt someone's
Yeah.
feelings, we feel bad, but it's not like we plan. Like, did you even get to the extent where you kind of planned something?
Yeah, that's where it was getting there. It was at a point where I was just so down in the dumps. It felt cataclysmic. It felt like I was walking to the edge of a cliff, and it felt like there was no option but to jump over the cliff. And a lot of it was because my visions of the future, everything that well, not everything, rather, I saw nothing possible. I saw nothing past what I knew in this moment. And so, in a nutshell, what happened was I came back from Winnipeg. I had experienced a ton of issues and trauma in my own life, and then I come back and I was homeless. All my stuff was in my car, and
Oh,
I was bouncing around like from friend to friend, like just trying to like get by. And then I ended up getting a job, and I was at the job, and my girlfriend at the time, who was very supportive, she was doing the best she could. She came in one day. It was just before Christmas or after. I think it was just after Christmas, and it was we were in there working. This is actually I was working at Lululemon, and it's funny because I've talked to them and they're like we would have never known, and it's like we
mhm.
just don't know. People are hiding right there, and that's one of the big things that I aspire to inspire people to recognize that we can put down the mask and talk about things because it actually helps everybody heal.
I agree.
Plus, yeah, and I just I accepted it. I was like, why am I thinking about spending my money to fly away so I can get away from everybody in my life? Like, where is that coming from? It didn't feel right, but it's like it was almost like it was this aspect of me that was thinking about doing things that Frank wouldn't do. So I was like, who is that? What is going on? So I admitted to my girlfriend at the time. I said I don't feel good. I don't know why, but I feel like I want to kill myself. And because from the outside it's hard to comprehend. I understand her emotion. I felt very numb. I was on medication, which that also does play a part in that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it was me acknowledging that I didn't feel like I didn't love myself, and I acknowledged it. And then I realized that I had to do something about it. And then in that moment, it took me on an adventure to slow down and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and it's interesting because with you, because those that know you, you have such one thing that really draws me to you, Frank, is your energy and your personality. So it's like obviously people didn't know that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we see you show up to come work out, and no
Hmm.
matter what was going on in your background, or what was happening in your life, you were always very friendly and receptive and chatty with people
Mm.
at the gym. So I hate to hear that you had to go through that. I'm shocked actually because I
Yeah.
didn't know that all this sort of stuff was happening for you.
No,
And I'm
really.
so happy that you're still here, and I'm so happy that you've taken a different outlook on life, and things are better, and now you're here to help other people. And I think that's amazing. You're an amazing person, and you're a kid. You're
Yeah,
a
just a little kid without a beard.
Yeah, I wish everybody could see you without the beard. Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious, do you feel that at any part in your life as well too? I ask people this, but were you ever bullied?
I was bullied, and I mean, it wasn't a crazy aspect of my life. Actually, as you mentioned, as we're talking about it, it was an interesting way of being bullied because when I think of bullying, I think at school, people in the playground. But where the bullying came in for me was actually at home. I was actually like I dealt with, and again, I just want to clear before I get into this that like I have no hate or like no resentment because at the end of the day, I recognize now and I talk with my parents. Everybody was doing the best they could with
Okay.
what they knew. So I don't hold a grudge. This is just what happened, and I am now an adult who gets to heal from my experiences and not do the same unto another person. So
Right.
I just before getting into this,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I went and at home I dealt with a lot of emotional abuse, and it was just everybody was going through their issues, and it seemed to always, as I experienced it, it would like pour on me. Um, as I experienced it, and it it ended up it ended up causing a lot of resentment and distrust. And what I found is that my relationships with men were hard pressed because the man who was quote unquote closest to me in my life was just really breaking me down or trying to at least. And what I discover now that in my adventure was building me up to become a strong, resilient man. And that's where the bullying really came in, is because I didn't know it was bullying until I saw how other people were treated. And I'm like, wow, okay, so there's a discrepancy. And so we don't know what is until we see that there's other ways. But now I know that that's what I experienced growing up.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because we always think about bullying usually happens on the playground or happens at school. Maybe there's a little bit in the workplace, but we don't often think about some of that stuff can happen at home. Do you is your relationships better now with family, or is
Yeah,
it still in
so
the works?
relationships with family, they evolve. Everybody's growing in
Good,
this, everybody's dealing with the new day.
good.
And the relationships, they do get better. And so I would say, like with my stepdad, it is healthier, bygones are bygones and everything's good. And then I also have the emotional intelligence and the awareness to know that there's some things might not serve me. So if I feel unwell in a space, then I get to take care of myself and step away. And that is what I recognize now as an adult, is that when I was younger, I didn't have the capacity or the knowledge to recognize what was happening. So I endured things that I probably didn't have to. I could have stepped away. Now, as an adult, I recognize that I can step away at any moment, and I can educate and support others in stepping away and discovering their power in the same breath, too.
Interesting. I wanted to ask, just
Mhm.
because, but as a person of color, do you feel that has that created any difficulties for you, or are people really good about it?
You know what's interesting?
Yeah,
As a man of color, I never feel like it's affected me
good.
out in the community, but like sometimes it can come up and I'm just not aware of it. But I do my best to my big motto is just be nice.
Yes.
Just be nice. If that's what I put out there, then that's what I'll receive. And this supports me with dealing with stress and everything, is that I truly believe that anybody's in what is the way? Anybody's expression towards you, how other people treat you, is not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of their internal world. So
Yes.
I try not to take anything personally because I recognize that it's not about me, it's about them. And what I receive and interpret from them is the reflection of me.
Excellent. No, I think that's well said. Like, where do you get all this from? You must have read a lot of books. Because you just, yeah, you know a lot of things. I love, like, you're catching me with stuff. I'm like, wow, I never really thought about it that way. And I feel like I've been around a long time. I've faced a lot of adversities and stuff in life, and I've got through it. But part of it, and I think it's very similar to you, it's our personalities. Our personalities are very resilient, so we can get through things with people, right? Our personalities are very strong and friendly, so we can divert a lot of things and stuff like that as well. So maybe that's why I'm drawn to you a little bit more. So I want to go back a little bit to what you had said earlier, because I like the way you described that. So anxiety is fear and depression is repression. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes. So anxiety is fear and depression is reflection. And so, yes. And so this was something that, like, I downloaded, you call it, but, like, I'll talk about that later. But it just came to me and it was like, okay, so I'm a big believer that everything can be simplified, just like in math, like, you can simplify things. And so what I've noticed, and I get to talk about this more, is that as in the game of mental health, we see anxiety as it's happening to us. Like, oh, I'm like, as I see the world talk about it, is like, oh, I have anxiety, like it's on me, like I'm wearing an anxiety coat. And then I'm like, I mean, if that makes sense. So, like, it's like I'm wearing the anxiety coat. And then in that, the way I experience or look at anxiety is that anxiety is fear. So if I can identify what the fear is, then I can identify it and put a face to it, and then recognize and figure out how I can overcome it. And so the reason why I look at it that way is because, and this is my belief that I don't put on anybody, but I believe that if I'm prescribed a medication for anxiety, what that does is it suppresses my natural reaction to an external fear. Now I can't feel anything that gives me action. So that's where there's, like, the combination of the physical and the mental. So the mental aspect where I experience fear, and if I don't feel the reaction of my body, then I can't act on it. So all of that to say, like, I go so many places with this, but all that to say is anxiety equals fear, which makes me know that if I'm experiencing fear, then I know that it's not outside of me to be able to face it. Like, if I'm afraid to step in front of a crowd and speak to people, is that actually about me being afraid of stepping out in the crowd and speaking to people? Or is it about me fearing judgment or fearing whatever else? So then now there's layers. That creates a bunch of layers. It's a big discussion, and I talk with so many people about it. But what that really does is it gives me the power to know that I'm not wearing an anxiety coat. I'm experiencing fear. Now let me put a face to it. Let me go as deep as I can into what the source of it is. And then that's like healing. That's shadow work, and that's healing, and that's uncovering the trauma at its root. Like, am I afraid, or when I don't have a partner for X amount of years, is it because I don't want a relationship, or is it because I'm afraid of being intimate with X people? And is that because in my childhood, being intimate, as I subconsciously programmed it in my mind, was if I get intimate with somebody, they'll leave me, therefore I'll feel abandoned. So then it's like, oh my God, I'm 4 layers deep into, I thought I just didn't want a relationship, but it's no, I'm afraid of being intimate because I'm afraid of being abandoned, because when I'm abandoned, it makes me feel the same way I felt when I was 12 and I was abandoned by family. Wow. Now it's like,
this is deep.
Whoa. Yeah.
We're getting deep here. I've never even thought about stuff that way. Like, I liked when you had said about the because I've done a lot of acting in my past, and it's like, so my fear of going on the stage, is it because I'm just afraid to be out there, or is it because I'm afraid that I'm going to do something? You know what it really was for me? I feel like a lot of it, looking back, was as a gay man and I'd be playing these straight roles, I would feel like people would be judging me and saying, like, why is this gay person playing a straight role? And that would create anxiety in me, and it shouldn't. And that was when I was younger, but now I'm older. I don't care. I don't care. I am who I am, right? You like it or leave it or whatever. But that kept me back for me, it kept me back a lot from doing a lot of the things I wanted to do when I was younger because I was scared that people were gonna associate that, oh, you're trying to be this person, but you're actually really gay.
Mhm.
And so that's stuff that I had to deal with, growing
Yeah.
up, and now I feel better about it. I'm curious to you, like a friend that had come on and done an episode with me earlier through therapy. He talks about how important transparency is. And that's what our discussion was a lot of. He was very open about all the things that have happened in his life and what got him to the place that he is today. And his therapist would tell him that transparency is important. You have to be transparent. Do you
Mhm.
agree with transparency?
Yeah, I feel like, and
You're essentially doing that right now. You're being
yeah,
transparent, right?
yeah, I found that in my lifetime up to this point, I've held a lot of things back and I haven't been honest. And the truth is, we all do. And what I
Absolutely.
found is that we carry that stuff with us, and we can't hide from it. And what I found in this is powerful. So I've done some healing work, some active conscious trauma work where we'll uncover things, do meditations, and the whole bit. And what I recognize is that after you open a door and you look at the monster, which is something that you haven't faced in years, and you defeat the monster and you heal from it, come to find out there's actually a door behind that. And so that door requires another level of transparency because it means you're going deeper. And the deeper you go, the more honest you get to be about what you've been holding on to, the stories you've been telling yourself. And so what I appreciate about all that is that this healing journey, it really requires that authenticity. And it's the big thing is I'm recognizing now is that it's like a neutral experience. Now I can't hold against anybody anything because ultimately we're all going through something. And so imagine, like, I just think I had this thought the other day. Imagine if the whole world had an open, if imagine if we just let everything go, all 8 billion, we just let everything go and we lived in love. That would mean that we were just open and transparent and let everything go. Like, that would be powerful, but it's not easy because of our own fears of judgment and the whole bit. So it's this interesting big game, mental health, but I love it. I think there's a beautiful solution that we get to uncover together.
We do. And so just to further, so I'm getting the a sense.
Mhm.
Are you pro medication to treat things or maybe looking for alternatives? I mean, and it's fair, right? Because I feel like in some ways people get medicated when they don't need to be medicated. And I agree with what you say. Sometimes when you give people medication, it kind of kills the person that they are, their personality. It deadens it, right? And
Mhm.
if I had to use an example, and I feel like maybe she had to have it, but like Britney Spears is an example. She was kind of very bubbly
Mhm.
and light. And then when she went through her mental illness and then they treated her, she was a very different person. She had like no affect, talked in a monotone. And I feel like they suppressed so much of her personality through
Mhm.
medication that she's not essentially the same person anymore. Um, but maybe she needed it, right? Because she went through that really kind of rough
Mhm.
spell, right? Is Do you use medication?
Yeah, so that's actually I'm not for or against. I'm a
Okay.
believer that everybody has a recipe for their life soup or however they want to live their life. I know that for myself, my life became more difficult while I was taking
Okay.
medication. And so there was and like, so I'm diagnosed as bipolar, and they say if you're diagnosed as bipolar, you take X medications, da da
Hmm.
da da. I haven't been on medication since the middle of 2019. And what I've discovered in this process for me that provides me peace of mind is that I'm doing so much work to heal my past that what I'm finding is that what if what if my mental illness is not like a physiological DNA thing, and what if it's a trauma thing? What if
Hmm.
it's I get to heal from my trauma and release the stress so I can move forward and create new patterns, new ways of thinking, new ways of being. So that means I'm unlearning things that I learned unconsciously when I was a little kid. I'm
Right.
learning how to love. I'm learning how to be loved. I'm learning how to forgive. I'm learning how to set boundaries. Like there's a lot of things that I'm learning that were never taught to me as a child, and that has served me more than medication. And that's for me. I believe that there's an alternative, and I believe that our
Mhm.
bodies are meant to take care of itself naturally. But hey, if somebody gets to take medication, if they feel that they need it, by all means. I'm here to advocate or at least share that there is another way, but you have to be willing to do the work. Like
Right.
it's not a walk in the park for sure.
Yeah, and that's what this is about, right? And there's no way that, and I like that too, that, it's what works for you may not work for somebody else. And that's the thing, right? You're not in there trying to say, hey, you shouldn't be taking medication or whatever. The medication may work for you, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe it's the easier way for some people, right? They just take a medication and then it just explains all of their things away. But even if you're on medication, there's still some work. There's definitely some work that still needs to be done in regards to that. So, do you have a counselor or therapist? Do you do any of that? Are you doing all this kind of stuff on your own through research? What's happening? What's helping you through with that stuff?
Yeah, so I have a therapist that I go to occasionally whenever I feel called to.
Good.
Outside of the therapist, I have a great network of friends, and this is where, as I started getting into my authentic and my true nature for my adventures, I started meeting people that were more aligned with who I be, and it's actually made me feel much safer speaking about what fires me up because I
Good.
know that I'm not alone. So I have a therapist, I have a spiritual mentor, I have friends that actually speak my language as I call it because it's like I have this newfound perspective on life that has amplified how I see what's possible by a million. I was very fortunate to have a friend who inspired me to take this emotional intelligence and leadership course that I took, and that accelerated my transformation. So that was in the middle of, or third quarter going into fourth quarter of last year. And then since then, I've really been embracing new ways of being, which were for me meditation and reading books that these are like I don't read How to Get Rich
Yeah.
by like that's not I acknowledge everything
Yeah.
that everybody chooses. My vibe is more about the spiritual and what we can't see, and it brings me so much peace, and I believe it, and it's been something that serviced me. I see things in a new way. I see things that seem to be a lot deeper, and it makes sense to me, and now I know that there's truth to it, so I'm like, okay,
That's
I'm gonna do
great.
it.
That's
Yeah,
great.
thank
I
you.
I mean, I mean, I know stuff about you, but I'm loving what I hear. I just think that the path that you're on and the journey you're on, Frank, is amazing, and I really commend you for that. That's awesome. Keep it
Thank
up. Keep it up. Um, Okay, so let's talk about, because I wanted to talk a little bit more about your background, just because we're kind of
you.
going that way, so people understand kind of where you're coming from.
Mhm.
How did things, because we talked a lot about in 2018 and then 2019, how does a pandemic
Mhm.
affect your anxiety and or depression? How has that affected you? How have you gotten through that? Was there low
Mhm.
times? Was there high times? Like, tell us a little bit about what happened there, right? Because that's life changing for everybody.
Everybody was crushed by it. Like, I mean, I'm not saying everybody was. I'm sure some people just they were blessed. God bless them.
Yeah.
Um, for me, so this whole thing started in March,
Hmm.
and like it was in there in March. I went through some challenging times, March, April, May, and it was like outside of my home, I was alive and living well, but when I came back to my home, things slowed down and I was reflecting
Okay.
on what happened prior to, which was a very serious breakup for me. Like it was very emotionally taxing and it really surfaced a lot of things about myself that I had the privilege to work on during this pandemic.
Right.
I was able to look at myself and see. Um, and what I experienced during this pandemic up to this point was I experienced periods of low energy where, and this is powerful for me, when I don't have the energy to operate at a high level, I'm learning to embrace it as an opportunity to slow down, assess what's going on, align myself with what works for me, and then press forward. And then by the end of 2020, as the pandemic was seemed to be like opening up, or not the pandemic was opening, but Windsor, as we where we live, was
Right.
opening up. I began to gain more energy. Gyms were open. I was exercising, working out, building a foundation, and then they started closing down again. And so what I experienced, because for me, I believe there's holistic health, which is physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. My foundation of my health is probably physical, as for I would say most people. And
Yes.
so what this pandemic for me has provided is an opportunity to balance out the holistic healing. So rather than primarily depending on my physical health to maintain a healthy lifestyle, I've leaned more into the emotional health, which means to me expressing my emotions, being authentic and crying and all those feelings that I never felt before. Spiritual health means for me being connected to a higher source, which provides me more purpose as I see myself being of service to a bigger cause. And then the mental aspect is, am I happy with myself? Do I love myself? Am I okay? So I look at all of those pieces now. Going into 2021, I recognize that what I know now about myself is that I'm more than just a football player who works out. I have more that I am. I have more that I can be. And now I have a vision that I get to create that helps me see into the future. Because
Excellent.
if we go back to 2018 when I was crushed, I didn't have a vision past playing football. And
Right.
now I recognize that I can create it at any moment. And that's something I get to share with people too, is that we get to nurture our vision, because that's where we go. We go wherever our mind goes. And if it's blank, we see blank and we can create from that.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because say if we were to go back in 2018 and you never injured yourself and you were
Mm.
continuing to play football, do you feel like you would have discovered all of those things about you that you have now? So maybe some things are meant to be, right?
Exactly. And it's like, I think about if I was a professional athlete, well, because who knows, right? Because if I didn't get injured, I would have been playing at a high level. Who knows? Maybe I'd be in the NFL. Like, we don't
Right.
know. What I do know is that this, and I tell people if we get on this topic, but
Yeah.
when I was 5 years old, I asked my mom, I said, Mom, why are we here if we're gonna die? And
Yeah.
that's like, I'm five and I'm saying like, why, what the heck is the point of me being here at five? She never answered. And now as I stand here as a 28-year-old man with a few years outside of football, I'm starting to understand, and like I have a pretty good idea of what that means to me. Why am I actually here on a deeper level? And I feel like the universe and whatever my purpose is had to happen that way because I couldn't see anything outside of football. So I had to kind of get fast tracked, because a lot of the things that I know now supported me through this pandemic, and it's allowing me to support other people.
Right.
It's like, am I upset about it? Nah, not anymore, because I understand that it's supporting me and serving a higher good, which is what I've always asked for since I was five. So,
Yeah, and it's amazing that you asked that because I have often, sometimes when I'm getting ready for bed at night, I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking, fearful of
mhm.
dying because I don't want to die because I'm trying to figure out ways that I'm going to live forever.
Yes.
So that's part of it. And then it's also thinking, I think about sometimes why do we spend the time nurturing friendships and creating relationships and all that with people, and you're only going to end up dying anyway. So
Hmm.
why even bother? Because you can't take any of these people with you. So I often think about those things. And then I try to think about why I'm here. And I feel like based on feedback from friends or just people I've had in my life, I'm here to be somebody's friend. I'm here to create joy for them, maybe give them insight, maybe make them think about things. I want to really feel that I have a purpose being here, right?
Hmm.
And I feel that's what I love about the YouTube and the podcast as well too, because now I feel like I can share all of these things and then also share the stories of all the wonderful, amazing people that I've encountered in my lifetime. So, that helps me get through it. But at the same time, I'm still trying to figure out how to live forever. So if you have any tips on that, we
Yeah.
might get to another podcast about that.
Yes.
Okay. Exactly. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, okay, some of these questions, they're deep.
I'm here for it.
So we're deep. Um, so what are the advantages and disadvantages of those who suffered with anxiety pre-pandemic in comparison to those who have just recently had to confront this mental health issue now?
Okay.
Right?
So
this is deep.
yeah, and I mean, for me, it's something that I've openly dealt with before the pandemic, and I'm handling and working through always
Right.
now. What I feel is a big challenge is because in community we thrive, and now so a lot of people are being tasked with facing things on their own.
Thank
And
you. Yes.
along with that is because the topics aren't that heavily discussed. This is where I feel like it'd be very supportive for people to understand in a simple term what anxiety is and what depression is, because that would support people in understanding that what's happening to you now. And this is like, now when I think about this, we're getting bigger outside of just the bubble of COVID. What
Yes.
is this experience providing for the collective planet, or at the very least, what is it providing for Ontario, since we're in like a never ending lockdown situation?
Yeah.
What is this showing us? And that is, as I see it, it's an opportunity to reconnect with yourself.
Yes.
So this anxiety that we may be feeling, so anxiety may be pertaining to fear of death or fear of abandonment or fear of judgment for various reasons. Now it's an opportunity to dig into those core beliefs and what is actually going on, so that when the days come, you can step with confidence in your authentic self. Pertaining to the depression, and as I see it, reflection, for those who may not have ever stopped in their life, this pandemic created a stop, a hard stop. And so for those that were constantly going, now they're in a period where they're stopped, and they can't run away from their
Yes.
thoughts, and now they're experiencing a quote unquote depression. But maybe this is the universe serving you an opportunity to slow down, see what's important, see what's working, what's not, grow from it, and then we all get to press on as a collective. And so I hope that supports somebody.
Well, and yeah, and so that was me, right? So I feel like the pandemic was very good for introverts because it gave them a reason to stay home,
Yes.
right? Because they were like, "Oh, sorry, can't go to your party. There is
Too
COVID."
bad.
Okay, perfect. So now this is great. And then for me, I always tell everybody I'm an extrovert, extroverted extrovert. So that was my issue, is that I'd be out 7 days a week. Look, Frank, I would be so committed to being social that I would be tired from it. Like I would agree to things and go, why do I agree to these? Why do I just slip it out and think about, like, why didn't I just wait, right? But I was so excited to be involved in doing stuff with people. So then all of a sudden you're running, you got the engine running, and then all of a sudden your friends are like, in the beginning for me this was very difficult because my friends didn't want to hang out with me anymore. So I took it personally. And the way I dealt with it, and the way that I didn't necessarily deal with it, but the way I thought about it, and I had a very good friend that I can talk to about stuff, is that I felt because people didn't want to hang out with me, I wanted to punish them. So I'm like, fine, they don't want to hang out with me, I don't want to be their friend anymore, right? But then, a friend said to me, you have to remember, Sean, you can't punish people if they are fearful of something, right? So you have to understand, no one has been through an experience like this before. Now they have fear, right? And so if they don't want to hang out with you, it's not personal. It's because they're fearful. They're fearful for their life. It has nothing to do with you. So, it also gave me a lot of time to spend time on my own, that I got to enjoy a lot of the things that I had purchased. I had game systems and stuff, and I didn't play with any because I was out on the time. It gave me time to also reflect on who I was, and the person that I want to be moving forward. Things will be different after this pandemic. Am I going to be out 7 days a week? Absolutely not. Are you going to see me one day a week? If you're lucky. Right. So, that's where I am right now. Where I am right now. My friend Joe, who came on to talk about his path and talk about transparency, this was good for him because he was someone who was battling alcohol. So he said to me in the podcast that, Sean, COVID is one of the best things that could have ever happened in my life. Unfortunately, people did die, people got sick or whatever. But for me, so he's been 18 months sober. So, he dealt with a lot of those things. He seeked out the therapy that he needed. He got into a very healthy relationship. He stopped drinking because our friendship was every 4 months. I'm like, oh, there's Joe. He's disappeared because he's drinking, right? So he doesn't text anybody because he's ashamed of it. And but now it's been great. It's been 18 months. So yeah, so there's what you were kind of talking about earlier, that some people have done very well with this, and it was needed, right? The stop and the life needed, because I think we're just out of control. It's crazy. And there's a whole bunch of things we can go into, right? We could go into validation on social media and how that creates depression. I have young friends who are like, that's their life. If someone doesn't like their photo, that it's the end of the world for them, right? So you can get into, crazy stuff like that as well too. So this is a good question. How different types of anxiety, so say like health, social, OCD, have been impacted by COVID? Like in terms of how do you see how some of those things have been impacted, like your mental health, your social health, maybe OCD? Are people more obsessive now, right? Because in the beginning, I feel like some people brought out some of their stuff. The people that wash the groceries, I was like, hell no. If you think I hate grocery shopping, and if you think I'm coming home and spending an hour wiping down my groceries, you're crazy. So, right. But I feel like that the pandemic kind of brought those things out in people, right? So there's did any of that happen to you?
Well, what I found is that this really, really just put everything into perspective. It really it made it made me realize the it made me realize that there's so much going on in everybody's head,
Yeah.
and that there's no way I can ever judge a book by its cover, because I can never appropriately calculate what's going on. I can have a great idea, but I can't make up a story of what I thought anything was supposed to be
Right.
unless I experience it firsthand, or if I hear it from somebody's mouth. And so what I find that this pandemic provided us with, really as a collective, an opportunity to look at ourselves and see what's working and what's not. And that is what probably creates a lot of mental health issues, because my experience of the world is that we don't take a look at ourselves. And so we don't look in the mirror, and we don't take in what's working, what's not working. And that's probably what caused a lot more issues than ever.
Okay. And so in terms of um, what about, so what's your take maybe on the difference between depression and anxiety, and how the pandemic has pushed many anxious people into
Mhm.
depression? So a lot of people don't have depression, right? But I know a
Mhm.
lot of people who are very anxious people. But
Mhm.
because of the pandemic, that anxiety then kind of
Mhm.
became depression, right?
Yeah, so as I see it, with anxiety and depression both being experiences that we have, I feel like a lot of the fears have caused regression into a state of reflection. So, for example, somebody who is often going to the gym to exercise,
Mm-hmm.
and who may not be exercising at all, that creates a fear of judgment, or whatever fears may creep up on them, that causes them to go into a depression, where now they're thinking about potentially all those moments where they could have went to the gym, and self-loathing, and all these characteristics of, I would say, like, lack of self-love. And so fear, which paralyzes us, may cause us to begin reflecting on what it may be that caused the fear, or based on how we treat ourselves, the self sabotage and the self beat up of what created that fear in the first place. And so, what I see is that, with reflection and depression being a result of anxiety, fear, which can be paralyzing, creates this result of reflection and depression, where people are like, wow, I get to sit back and look at what's going on. And then that can get into, depending on where we're at, like, if I've programmed myself to look at the bright side of things, But before, like I was thinking negative all the time. Like when I was low energy, I was thinking poor. So with a lot of people, this might cause those real authentic emotions and feelings about self to manifest much bigger because they've had to go there for the first time.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. Well said. Um, when were you first, is the bipolar diagnosis something recent? When were you diagnosed with that?
That was in 2018,
Wow, that
and
was a big year.
yeah, it was big. I
Yeah.
finished my football career, and so long story short, I was in Winnipeg when I was diagnosed, and
Okay.
I was experiencing what they call a manic episode, what I call now
Mhm.
an awakening. I had experienced a disgusting, like in the best way, I experienced an incredible amount of energy, and it was euphoric and it was love. And under the medical diagnosis is that this euphoria is not healthy. And
Right.
what I know now is that like that experience is actually quite beautiful. And when around the right people under the right conditions can be nurtured into some valuable information and valuable things for the collective. And so because like in Eastern culture in India, what I went through, it would have been nurtured and it would have been, so what are you getting? What's coming up? What's, and as I was sharing what I was sharing, I found that I was experiencing a lot of judgment and fear rather than acceptance and understanding. And so that pertains to the stigma that if somebody's experiencing that, then they're going cuckoo or something and they got to go to the hospital. And I'm like, I, it's like that's how I experienced it. And it's from the people that I know that worked in the hospital to being somebody that was in the hospital in front of the people that I know who worked there to now being treated differently by the people that I knew. It's
Yeah.
like it's just this long list of experiences that let me know now that I've seen both sides and I have something that I understand as magic and powerful and actually contributing to society as opposed to something that was detrimental and breaking me down. So that's how I see it now.
Yeah.
Thank you for my experience.
No, and that's great because I think that do you feel or in the beginning, maybe when you were first telling people, because I feel like when people tell people they have bipolar, people react. They think,
Mm.
"Oh my God, you're crazy." It's a very negative term to say bipolar because they think of, and like we had talked a little bit earlier, like Britney Spears was diagnosed with bipolar as well too,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so obviously she's a very different person than you are, and maybe
Mhm.
she hasn't traveled the path that you have to figure it out, and maybe because you and I don't know her, maybe she does need some medication. We don't know
You
necessarily.
don't know. Yeah.
Everything works different for everybody, right?
Mhm.
So did you feel that there was a lot of negativity when you would tell people?
Yeah, I was ashamed to tell people at
Yeah.
all. So after I got out of the hospital, after I was there for a week, I went back to the football team and they were like, just don't talk about it. Like we'll just kind of, and it was just kind of hush hush. When I went back home, my friend group, we never had conversations about it. It was just kind of like, it was almost as if I was told by a doctor it was going to be the rest of my life. And then I couldn't even talk about it to the people around me because they didn't know how to talk about it. Nobody did, and a lot of it was just because and like nobody experienced it, so nobody really
That's
knew.
right.
And then as I was sharing my experience, it was like I can't understand you, and so there's just this like big disconnect. And now that I have the language to talk about what I went through, I recognize for those that can't comprehend, it's okay. And what I get to do is just support them in trying to comprehend. And if they don't want to, then I mean, that's not up to me anymore. That's
That's
not,
not on you. That's not on
no.
you. Absolutely. And that's the thing. And I think that's really important that because you have the language, I love that word
Mhm.
that you're using there, because you have the language and you better understand it, it's very easy for you to talk to people about it so that they
Mhm.
can understand it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what's important. People don't talk about things because they're fearful and they also don't want to talk about it because they don't know what to say to you. They don't want to get you
Mhm.
upset. But if you can talk and have a very open discussion with your friends, and that's what your friends are for, right? If they're
Yeah.
truly your friends, they will accept you for whatever. And it's important that you include them in that and also educate them. People need to be
Yeah.
educated on that stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you can talk about it and you talk about it very comfortably. So when you bring up the term, when you say bipolar, I didn't sense any being uncomfortable bringing up that.
Yeah.
It's part of who you are, right? It's part of who you
I
are.
mean, yeah, and like I see it as a doctor diagnosed me doesn't mean that that it's like it doesn't have to be a massive impact in my life. It can be something that so it act like I see it as a gift now because
Yes.
I've been almost 2 years without medication, and I have my good and bad days. I'm human, but I
Hmm.
love my life, and I know that I serve a divine purpose, and that's how I live. It brings me peace, and I know that I have an opportunity. Like, oh, he's bipolar, and he owns his own business, and he's speaking, and he's oh, so then we can have those conversations, right? So
Right.
that's where we get to go.
That's right. I do want to bring up one thing because
Yeah,
I love it because it's a term that's very unique to you, and I see it. You say it verbally, but a lot of times in text, it's got you.
yeah.
Is this something you've always said, or is this something, what is the origin of the background of you saying that to people? I like to know. No one else says it
No
except
one
for
else
you.
says it?
No one else says that to me. It's only you, and that's why I know it's specifically you texting. Yeah.
No way, that's funny. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
say like got you, like I got you.
Yeah.
It's like I got you, but it's got you. Like we just clump it together like I got you. And it's probably, I mean, I've probably said it for as long as I can remember. It's funny. I did not expect you to say that word when you were talking about words, but yeah,
No.
I got you. I got you. It's just, I
It's
got you.
things that I appreciate out of my friends, and it's things that remind me of them. So that's why I
Mhm.
felt it was very important because only you say that, and you spell it that way, the
Oh,
GOTCHU, right? Because most people would say got you, and
yeah.
you got the got you in there, right? So I just think it's
That's
important.
awesome.
It's important. I wanted to bring that up. So, I wanted to know because I think this is important. I want to know where we are going to see Frank. Where do you see yourself in 1 year, and
Mhm.
where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I love this question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, well, a year from now, I see myself somewhere warm on my way back from wherever that may be to Windsor to enjoy the Windsor warm. And a year from now, I see myself running the programs that I'm working on creating in support of the youth in the community. I see myself exploring business in other ways and pretty much building up and growing my platform so that I can be of service to the most people as possible. And in 5 years, I see myself really living a big, bold life. I'm 28 now, so five
Yeah.
years from now, I'll be 33 years young. I see myself ideally owning a home both in Windsor and somewhere warm that I can escape to when it gets cold. And I see myself really living my purpose and my passion, which is supporting people in healing. I'm a big believer that every single person on this planet is a divine person, a divine soul, a divine being. And I would love to support people in discovering that because that would therefore mean that everybody has a valuable, important role in this planet, which would create even more energy out of me knowing that when I was in a really dark place and I was asking like why, what's going on, that would support me in understanding that this is still a big part of my purpose. So
I think that's fantastic. I also, while you were telling me that, I'm thinking, why does this guy not? He has a Yeti microphone and a laptop and does not have a podcast.
not yet.
Not yet. It needs to come. You have got so
Yeah.
much stuff to talk about, and especially I'm going to say, your generation, the millennials. One thing that they lack, and I find that there's a big lack, is a lot of self-confidence, right? They doubt
Mm.
themselves. And I don't, and to the point that I don't think that they know how to get better at that, right?
Ah,
So I think that if you're thinking about something or if you want to get into sharing your life experiences and whatever, but I think definitely for you generationally is finding ways to help millennials be more confident about themselves. There's something lacking there, definitely from my generation. I was raised very differently than say millennials are raised nowadays, and I just
yeah.
have noticed that a lot of them lack self-confidence.
Mm.
So I think that's definitely something that maybe you could talk about anyway, right? You can have a
Yeah,
bunch
I
of
appreciate.
millennials on and talk about all of their issues
Yeah, you
and how
rock.
to
I
get
appreciate that.
and how to get better at it. So I just wanted to know also, just so people, is there any social media platforms that people can follow you on? Is there anything that you're also in terms of that? Let me know. And anything that maybe you said you like to read, is there a mantra or a book that you live by that maybe that's helped you come to terms? I think it's important to maybe to even share something like that. So yeah, so what's your social media stuff at this point?
Yeah, so all of my social media is at Frankie Reno, FrankeyRenaud. In terms of books, I have a ton of books that I enjoy reading. I've read The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, which is a great book. I've read I read, like I've mentioned, I read like the more spiritual stuff. So I've read The Four Agreements. I've read The Alchemist. I dove into Celestine Prophecy. And if you haven't heard of these books, so The Four Agreements talks about four ways of living that'll support you in living a free life. The Way of the Peaceful Warrior actually talks about how to live in your purpose, and it's an incredible story, a true story I heard, and that's an incredible story of perseverance and understanding life on a deeper perspective. And then The Celestine Prophecy is a book that I read, and it's so interesting. This book, it's written from the 1980s. What's going on in this book is very accurate to what's going on today with the COVID pandemic and everything.
Right.
And so I'm like, I put the two together, and so it's great. So these are the kind of books that I've been reading. They support me, and I feel like how I look at it is, if everybody's going this way and speaking about money and earning and power and the whole bit, and a lot of the people I don't see going this direction, talking about spirituality and knowing yourself and the other stuff that to me is actually fun, maybe I'll meet somewhere down the line and we can have those bigger conversations, because there's going to be pieces missing. So this is where I get to fold in. So yeah, that's what I get to talk about, and that's what
Excellent.
I get to
I want to add. I want to give in three. I want you to give me something here in closing.
Yes.
Three things. Your top three things, or three things that people can do to help with anxiety.
Okay. Put a name to it. What is it that is getting you bogged up right now? For example, in the morning, sometimes I experience this body shiver, like this weight on my chest. What is it, Frank? Are you afraid of? What is it that's holding you down? What's keeping you in bed? For me, it's fear of success. And so I don't want to get up, because I know that means I get to face my day. So put a face to it. Another one that's very powerful is also to be kind to yourself and be patient. Patience is king. They always say, who won the race, the tortoise or the hare? Slow it down and remember that everything you're experiencing, as I see it, everything we're experiencing is for us. So that anxious feeling, that fear, that depression episode, that reflection that you're feeling, embrace it for the lesson that it is for you. And more often than not, you're going to get a nugget out of it, then you can let go of the rest and take it. And then third is also, don't be afraid to reach out just for even a 10-minute conversation with somebody. And I can't even tell you how many times I've benefited from literally reaching out to a homie or a friend and be like, hey, even the other night I said, wow, my heart is closed. Like, I am afraid of intimacy. And then that turned into 2 hours of conversation talking about why are we afraid of intimacy?
Yeah.
And so like, that's where being vulnerable and being open opens so many doors to so much growth for so many people. And so I hope those are three things that serve people in their lives.
That those are fantastic things. I love those points. I just want to say, and I don't give this out very often, I've only given this title to one other person. But I will say this. You are an amazing and wonderful and friendly human being. And I think that's super, super important. I've only given that to one other person, and that's my friend Cody, who runs the Speedo movement. Just an all around, nothing gets him down. He's top of the world. And he's sharing what's important. And I give you that. You're number two. You're number
I
2.
take it. That's my favorite number.
You got that title. You got that title. Frank, I want to say thank you for being a part of this. I do want to have you come back.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to do a talking about why we are afraid of intimacy in terms of relationships and friendships and whatever. I think that would be a great topic. I'd love to come back for that. And I just want to say thank you so much today for sharing this. It's so important. People are going to love this podcast. They're going to find out more about Frank. He's not just a football player.
No.
You know, right? And he's more than someone who just has a cute butt. He is a human being, right?
I am a human.
That's right. So I love that. And those that don't know who you are can look you up on social media, so I can at least put a face to a voice. And and just keep doing what you're doing. And of course, I know you got me and I got you.
Always.
And I'll be reaching out to you. And just keep doing what you're doing. Live the journey. I'm just glad you got a great support, and I'm glad that you figured out who you are and where you need to be. So thank you so much.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you for listening today. If you are not following me yet, you can follow me on social media at Instagram and Facebook at Sean's Magical Odyssey. And of course, you can always see my friendly face on YouTube at Sean's Magical Odyssey as well. And you can follow me on Twitter at Magical Sean. So guys, wherever you are, stay safe, love one another, get vaccinated, and we'll see you next time on Sean's Magical Odyssey.